What if I told you there's a perfectly legal trick that lets rich people live like absolute royalty while paying practically zero in taxes? And when they kick the bucket, their kids inherit everything without the government touching a single penny. I bet you're thinking I'm about to pitch you some shady offshore scam or one of those pyramid scheme nightmares, right? But here's what's going to absolutely blow your mind. This isn't some crazy tax-dodging conspiracy hatched in some sketchy island hideaway. No. This strategy has been sitting right under our noses for more than 100 years. And get this, it's so beautifully simple that a law professor had to slap a 3-word label on it just so people could wrap their heads around how the super rich stay super rich. My name is John, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time digging into the money moves that keep the wealthy in a completely different universe from the rest of us. If you're sick and tired of watching billionaires pay less in taxes than school teachers while you're getting absolutely destroyed every tax season, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button right now. And hey, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from because I want to know how many of us are finally waking up to how this game is actually rigged. Hit that like button too if what I'm about to show you completely changes how you see the world of money and taxes.
The strategy I'm breaking down for you is called buy, borrow, die. And before you shake your head thinking this is just another fantasy scheme to get rich quick, let me make something crystal clear right now. This isn't something you can pull off with a couple $100 sitting in your bank account. We're talking about a wealth protection system that needs serious money to actually work. But here's the thing, understanding how this whole operation runs will totally transform the way you think about taxes, investing, and why wealthy people seem to operate under completely different laws than you and me. Professor Edward McCaffrey over at USC came up with this catchy phrase way back in the mid-1990s, and here's the wild part, he wasn't trying to help rich folks get even richer. He was trying to explain to his students why our tax system felt so ridiculously unfair. For years, all these academics and tax experts brushed off his explanation like it was too basic. They probably figured he was just dumbing things down for college kids who couldn't handle the real complicated stuff in tax law. Then 2021 comes along and ProPublica drops this massive bombshell report using leaked IRS information that proved McCaffrey had been spot on the entire time. The wealthy weren't just paying lower tax rates than working Americans. They were paying almost nothing at all. Now here's where things get really interesting, and honestly pretty infuriating if you're someone who actually pays their fair share in taxes. The buy, borrow, die strategy takes advantage of completely legal pieces of our tax code that have been sitting there for decades. This isn't about discovering loopholes or bending the rules until they snap. This is about using the system exactly the way it was built, just in ways that regular people never even knew existed in the first place. Let me walk you through how this whole thing actually works, because once you get the mechanics of it, you'll never look at wealth the same way ever again. The first part is the buy phase, and this is where rich people make a choice that separates them from pretty much everyone else on the planet. Instead of earning regular income that gets taxed the second it hits their account, they focus on buying assets that go up in value but don't create regular taxable income. We're talking about stocks that don't hand out dividends, real estate that shoots up in value, fancy art collections, shares in private companies, and other investments that just quietly grow bigger and bigger in the background. Here's the key to this whole thing. These assets can grow in value for decades and decades without triggering any tax bills whatsoever. As long as you never sell them, the government literally can't touch those gains. It's like watching your total wealth climb higher and higher while the IRS just sits there on the sidelines completely powerless to collect a single dollar from you. Think about how insanely different this is from how most regular people try to build wealth. You go to your job, earn your paycheck, and immediately get slammed with income taxes, social security taxes, Medicare taxes, and whatever your state feels like taking. Then you try to save whatever scraps are left over, maybe toss it in a retirement account or save up for a house. But wealthy people completely flip this entire playbook upside down. They buy assets first, let them grow without paying taxes, and then figure out how to access that wealth without ever triggering a taxable event. Now you're probably wondering how someone actually lives off assets they never sell, right? After all, you can't pay your rent with unrealized capital gains, and the grocery store isn't going to accept stock certificates when you're checking out. This brings us to the second phase of the strategy, which is honestly the most genius part of this entire system. The borrow phase is where the real magic happens. Once you've got substantial assets that keep growing in value, you can use them as collateral to get loans. Modern banks have created these super sophisticated lending products specifically designed for exactly this purpose. Securities-based lines of credit let wealthy people borrow against their investment portfolios without having to sell a single share of anything. Here's the absolutely beautiful part from a tax perspective. The government doesn't tax money you borrow. Let that sink in for a second. If you borrow $1 million against your stock portfolio, that $1 million shows up in your bank account completely tax-free. You can use that money to buy mansions, luxury cars, exotic vacations, or literally anything your heart desires. And the IRS treats it like it doesn't even exist. The terms on these loans are usually pretty sweet for wealthy borrowers too. Interest rates are often lower than regular bank loans or home equity lines. Lenders might advance 70 to 80% of the value of your stocks and bonds, and even more if you've got treasury securities. The bigger your portfolio, the better rates you can score. Some wealthy folks can borrow at rates as low as 2 to 3% per year. But here's where it gets even more insane. While you're borrowing against your assets, those assets just keep growing. Think about it this way. If your portfolio is earning 7 or 8% every year and you're only paying 3% interest on your loan, you're still coming out way ahead. Your wealth keeps compounding and multiplying while you're accessing cash without any tax consequences whatsoever. This creates this endless cycle that can theoretically go on forever. As your assets grow bigger, your borrowing power increases. You can take out even larger loans or refinance your existing debt at even better rates. Meanwhile, you're living your best life off borrowed money while your actual wealth just keeps growing untouched in the background. Now you're probably thinking, hold on, this sounds way too good to be true. What happens when these loans need to be paid back? What if the assets lose value? What about all that piled up debt? This is where the third phase kicks in, and it's the part that really shows you how our tax system absolutely favors inherited wealth over money you actually work for. The die phase isn't just some dark play on words. It's the grand finale of a wealth preservation game plan that can stretch across multiple generations. When someone using this strategy eventually passes away, their heirs inherit all those appreciated assets through something called stepped-up basis. This is where the tax code basically hands the wealthy this massive gift that most regular people don't even know exists. Under current federal tax law, when you inherit assets, you receive them at their current market value, not at the price the original owner paid for them way back when. All those capital gains that built up over decades just vanish for tax purposes. If your grandmother bought stock for $10 a share 50 years ago, and it's worth $500 when she dies, you inherit it as if she paid $500 for it. All that appreciation becomes tax-free forever. This means the heirs can immediately turn around and sell the inherited assets without owing any capital gains taxes whatsoever. They can use the money to pay off any outstanding loans, and whatever's left over becomes their tax-free inheritance. The family wealth doesn't just survive the transfer between generations, it often comes out even stronger than before. The numbers behind this strategy will absolutely blow your mind into a million pieces, and they'll probably make you question everything you thought you knew about how wealth actually works in America. Let me walk you through a real-world example that shows just how powerful this system can be when you've got the money to make it work. Meet Maria, a successful entrepreneur who managed to stack up $1 million through years of building and selling businesses. Now Maria could do what most people do with a windfall like this. She could buy a big fancy house, some luxury cars, maybe take a few expensive vacations, and slowly watch her nest egg shrink as she pays taxes on any investment gains along the way. But Maria understands the game that wealthy people play, so she takes a completely different approach. Instead of spending her $1 million, Maria invests it in a diverse portfolio of assets that go up in value. We're talking about growth stocks, real estate investment trusts, private equity shares, and other investments specifically chosen because they have potential to shoot up in value without generating much taxable income along the way. She's not looking for dividends or rental income that would trigger immediate tax bills. She wants pure tax-deferred appreciation. Here's where the math becomes absolutely ridiculous. Let's say Maria's portfolio grows at a conservative 7% annually, which is actually below the historical average for diversified stock investments. After 10 years of compound growth, her $1 million portfolio is now worth nearly $2 million. That's a gain of almost $1 million that has never been touched by the tax man. If Maria were to sell these assets right now, she'd face a brutal tax bill. Between federal capital gains taxes at 20% and state capital gains taxes that could add another 5%, she's looking at paying roughly $250,000 to Uncle Sam. That's a quarter of her entire gain just disappearing into government coffers just for the privilege of accessing her own money. But Maria doesn't sell anything. Instead, she walks into her private bank and uses her $2 million portfolio as collateral for a securities-based line of credit. The bank, knowing that her assets are solid and that wealthy clients like Maria represent extremely low risk, offers her access to up to 70% of her portfolio's value. That means Maria can borrow up to $1.4 million without selling a single share of stock. The interest rate on this loan in today's market, let's say it's around 6.5% annually. So Maria is paying roughly $91,000 per year in interest to access $1.4 million in cash. Now, compare that to the nearly $300,000 tax bill she would have faced by selling her assets. Once you add up federal capital gains, the net investment income tax, and state taxes, she is effectively avoiding a massive tax hit by paying a much smaller annual cost. But wait, it gets even better. While Maria is paying 6.5% interest on her loan, her underlying portfolio just keeps on growing. If her investments generate an 8% annual return, which is right in line with the S&P 500's historical average, she's actually making a solid profit on this whole arrangement. Her portfolio grows by $160,000 per year, while she pays $91,000 in interest. She's netting $69,000 annually just by using debt instead of selling assets. This is where the strategy becomes almost comically unfair to everyone else. Maria is now living off borrowed money that the government can't tax. While her actual wealth continues to compound in the background, she can buy houses, cars, take vacations, invest in new businesses, or do whatever she wants with that $1.4 million, and none of it shows up as taxable income. As her portfolio continues to grow, her borrowing capacity increases as well. 5 years later, when her assets are worth $3 million, she can refinance her existing debt and potentially borrow even more money at even better rates. The cycle continues indefinitely, with Maria accessing larger and larger amounts of tax-free cash while her underlying wealth grows faster than her debt. Now, I know what you're thinking. This has to catch up with her eventually, right? What happens when Maria dies and all these loans come due? Won't her estate have to sell assets and pay massive taxes to settle the debt? This is where the final phase of the strategy reveals just how tilted the playing field really is. When Maria passes away 30 years later, let's say her portfolio has grown to $8 million through decades of uninterrupted compound growth. She's accumulated several $1,000,000 in outstanding loans over the years, but her assets have grown way faster than her debt. Her heirs inherit the entire $8 million portfolio at its current market value through stepped-up basis rules. Here's the kicker that will make your blood boil if you've ever paid capital gains taxes. All those decades of appreciation from the original $1 million to the final $8 million simply vanish for tax purposes. Maria's heirs can immediately sell $4 million worth of inherited assets to pay off the outstanding loans, and they owe absolutely zero in capital gains taxes. The remaining $4 million becomes their tax-free inheritance. Let's put this in perspective. Maria started with $1 million and managed to provide her family with a $4 million inheritance while living lavishly off borrowed money for 30 years. The total tax bill on this entire transaction? Essentially zero. Meanwhile, if you or I tried to build wealth through traditional methods like earning income and saving after-tax dollars, we'd be paying taxes at every single step of the process. The scale at which this strategy operates in the real world is absolutely staggering. We're not talking about a few wealthy families gaming the system. Securities-based lending has become this massive industry specifically designed to make this type of tax avoidance easy. Major financial institutions now offer these services as standard products for high-net-worth clients. The minimum portfolio size to access these lending programs varies by institution, but most require at least $1 million in investable assets. Some premium services require $5 or $10 million to get started. Once you meet these thresholds, the banks compete aggressively for your business, offering increasingly favorable terms as your wealth grows. Interest rates on securities-based loans are typically tied to benchmark rates like the London Interbank, offered rate plus a spread that decreases as your borrowing capacity increases. Wealthy individuals with $50 million portfolios might pay 2 percentage points less in interest than someone with a $5 million portfolio. The system literally rewards you for being richer. The types of assets that qualify as collateral have expanded dramatically over the past few decades. Traditional stocks and bonds have always been accepted, but now you can borrow against private equity investments, hedge fund shares, real estate investment trusts, and even certain types of collectibles and artwork. The financial industry has essentially created a lending product for every type of asset that wealthy people like to own. What makes this even more infuriating is how the strategy scales with wealth. Someone with $10 million in assets can borrow $7 million and live better than most people ever will while paying minimal taxes. Someone with $100 million can access $70 million in tax-free liquidity and still watch their net worth grow every single year. The more money you have, the more effectively this strategy works. The compounding effect over multiple generations creates dynastic wealth that becomes almost impossible to erode through taxation. Each generation inherits assets at stepped-up basis, continues the buy-borrow cycle and passes even more wealth to their children. Meanwhile, families trying to build wealth through earned income face tax rates that can exceed 40% when you combine federal and state obligations. This explains why wealth inequality has exploded over the past several decades despite periodic efforts to raise taxes on the wealthy. You can't tax wealth that never gets realized as income, and you can't collect capital gains taxes on assets that never get sold. The buy, borrow, die strategy allows wealthy families to effectively opt out of the tax system that everyone else participates in. The psychological impact of understanding this strategy can be profound, especially if you've spent your entire life believing that everyone plays by the same financial rules. It's like discovering that while you've been playing checkers, the wealthy have been playing three-dimensional chess with a completely different set of rules that nobody ever explained to you. The most frustrating part about all of this isn't just that the strategy exists. It's that our entire political and media discourse around tax policy completely misses the point. Politicians argue about raising or lowering tax rates while the ultra-wealthy sit back and laugh because tax rates are irrelevant when you never actually realize any taxable income. You could raise capital gains taxes to 90% tomorrow and it wouldn't affect someone using the buy, borrow, die strategy one bit because they never sell their assets. This creates this bizarre situation where middle-class families earning $60,000 a year pay higher effective tax rates than billionaires who control assets worth more than the GDP of small countries. The teacher, the nurse, the engineer, and the small business owner all get hammered with income taxes, payroll taxes, and property taxes while watching headlines about how the richest people in America paid less than 1% of their wealth in taxes. What's even more maddening is how the financial media covers this topic. They'll run breathless articles about tax avoidance strategies for regular people that might save you a few $100 on your annual tax bill while completely ignoring the elephant in the room. Meanwhile, wealth management firms are quietly marketing securities-based lending products to their high-net-worth clients like they're selling miracle cures. The marketing materials for these services read like something out of a fantasy novel. They promise tax-efficient liquidity solutions and wealth optimization strategies that allow you to maintain your investment positions while accessing capital for lifestyle and investment needs. It's corporate speak for helping rich people avoid taxes while everyone else foots the bill for running the country. But here's where things get really interesting from a practical standpoint. The buy, borrow, die strategy isn't just some theoretical concept that exists in academic papers and ProPublica investigations. It's actively shaping investment behavior and market dynamics in ways that most people don't recognize. When you understand that wealthy investors never plan to sell their assets, it completely changes how you think about stock valuations and market bubbles. Traditional investment analysis assumes that assets will eventually be sold and profits will be realized. But if the largest holders of appreciating assets never sell them, what does that do to market dynamics? It creates artificial scarcity and upward pressure on prices because a significant portion of the supply is permanently locked away. The wealthy aren't just avoiding taxes on their gains, they're potentially inflating the value of everyone else's investments by reducing the available supply. So there you have it. The buy, borrow, die strategy isn't some conspiracy theory or financial fairy tale. It's a perfectly legal tax avoidance technique that's been hiding in plain sight for over a century, allowing the ultra-wealthy to live like royalty while paying virtually nothing to support the society that made their wealth possible in the first place. Now you understand why billionaires can pay lower tax rates than their secretaries and why wealth inequality keeps exploding despite all the political theater about tax reform. The game was rigged from the start and most of us didn't even know we were playing by different rules.